Hi, and welcome to Lisa's Stamp Studio. I've got another card layout for you today, and I've got two samples using it. I'm going to be using the Harvest Hellos bundle. That's the stamp set with the coordinating apple builder punch. But in addition to making an apple, it also makes a pumpkin. I'm going to give you lots of tips about using this holiday catalog product. Here's one of the cards that we're going to be creating together, and I'm going to share an additional sample with you using this exact same layout. If this is your first time visiting my YouTube channel, I would love to have you subscribe. Click the subscribe button down below and make sure you click that small bell icon that's next to it. That will send you notifications of when I'm live here on YouTube, as well as when I upload a new video. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's project. Here's a close-up of the card we're going to be creating together today. Isn't this cute? This is regular notebook paper, and let's start with that portion of the card. I've pulled out a piece here from a small spiral notebook. I just purchased this at a big box store. I wanted that ripped spiral edge. I'm going to start by cutting this paper down so that it will fit on the front of my card. I'm going to measure off at the 4-inch mark. And then I'm also going to turn it and cut it at the 5-inch mark. So I'm aligning that here. Then I want to create the angle. The easiest way for me to teach you this angle, if you want it exactly like mine, is to line up the right corner tip of the paper or the cardstock at the 2.5-inch mark on your trimmer. And then navigate the bottom left corner so that it'll fall inside the trimming track. I'm going to recommend you slice from the top down, because if you start here where those perforated edges are, your blade can get stuck. So I'll go ahead and I'll just slice, and I'm going to do it slowly. And that's going to give us our angle. I'm going to set that aside, and then I'm going to bring in a piece of real red cardstock. And this is where I'm going to be doing my stamping of one of the apples. And I'm using the coordinating real red ink pad. That's just the beauty of Stampin' Up! Products, is the color coordination. I've pulled out that apple image here from the stamp set that's called Harvest Hellos. Lots of cute images. And if you recall in the introduction, I told you how the stamp set created both apples and pumpkins. Now you can buy this stamp set individually, or you can bundle it with the coordinating apple builder punch. Purchasing in a bundle will save you 10%. You'll find those products in the brand new Stampin' Up! Holiday Catalog. And if you don't already have a demonstrator and you would like a complimentary copy of the Holiday Catalog and or the Annual Catalog, head over to lisasstampstudio.com. Click on Contact Me and provide me with your name and address. I've just cleaned that stamp off camera, and I'm switching over now to Granny Apple Green cardstock and the Granny Apple Green ink pad. Once again, I'm going to ink up that stamp, and I'm going to stamp that here. While I've got the Granny Apple Green out, I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit of a background on this. And I'm using the stamp that's called Handwritten. This is a very large background stamp. I love the cursive text that's on here. I use my background stamps face up on my work surface. I find that's a lot easier. I'll start by inking up a small area here in the center. And because I don't want it to be too dark, I'm going to take a scratch piece of paper. This is one of the small grid sheets. And I'm going to lift off one layer of that ink to lighten it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my cardstock with the apple image right over the top. And then I'll take that paper one more time, and then I'll transfer the remaining ink to the center of that apple. I'm going to use the Memento ink pad to add the greeting to the inside of my red apples. And I'll go ahead and I'll ink that up, and I'm going to stamp that here in the center. I'm going to slide that off to the side, and I'm going to bring over a piece of crumb cake cardstock, and again the coordinating ink pad. And this time from that stamp set, I have pulled out the stem image. Now I want to show you a couple things about the stem image that are really unique. You'll see it here in the stamp set. If you use it with the widest end up, it's going to be reminiscent for the pumpkin. If you flip it around so that the skinnier end is up, it's going to be used for the apple. So I'm going to be using this for the apple. However, I know that the punch goes in a specific direction. Let me show you what I've done. In order to remind myself and which way to stamp it, since it is a builder punch, meaning there's more than one image, I created a template so that when I'm stamping, I can actually look at this and mimic the direction of that. If you're very precise, you can actually stamp right through the template, so that when I bring in the punch and I use it upside down, it's going to be aligned perfectly. So I'm going to stamp two of those. I'll stamp one here, and I'm going to leave room because of the punch, and I'll stamp another one here. I have my apple builder punch here, and I'm going to start with the one all the way on the right, and then I'll punch out the first one, and then I'll come over and I'll punch out the second one. I keep the template right inside the cover of the stamp set, and if you'd like, you can add a glue dot to the back. I'll use that punch once again to punch out each of the apples. I'm looking to leave a small margin of the stamp all the way around. The stamp set includes 2 different leaves. There's one here that can be used for the apple, and the other one here for the pumpkin. But the great thing about the punch is if you decide you don't want that detail, there's a leaf built in here. I've got a piece of garden green cardstock, and I'm going to punch out 2 of those leaves, one for each of my apples. I wanted to add a little bit of realism to these, so I'm going to use my Take Your Pick tool, and I've got the paper piercing tool attachment on here. This dials out, and there are interchangeable tips. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come straight down here, and I'm just going to create a crease. I'm not even concerned that it's not straight. And then I'm going to bend these in half right on that crease mark, just to get a little bit of dimension to those. We're going to set those aside, and now what we're going to do is we're going to assemble our apples. If you've not watched my videos before, I'm a big fan of the silicone craft sheet. Adhesive, liquid glue, and hot glue will not stick to it, which makes it great for keeping your work surface clean, especially when you're using very small pieces. Here's that red apple. I'm going to add a little adhesive here near the edge. Now typically that excess would fall on my work surface, but it's right here on top of the silicone craft sheet. Knowing that it won't stick, I can leave that now face down on there, and I've used my Take Your Pick pickup tool, and I've got the stem. Then all I'm going to do is navigate that to the height of my apple. I've got the Granny Apple Green apple as well, and we'll do the exact same thing on this one. I'm careful to turn the stem to make sure that it's going in the right direction. Now that I've got those tacked in place, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add those leaves we created. And I'm going to use glue dots for that. I'm going to peel back one of the glue dots. I'm going to use my Take Your Pick tool to help pick those up. I'm going to add a glue dot here near the end. And I'll attach one of those here. And then I'll do the same thing now on the other apple. Now that the apples are finished, I'm going to set those aside, and then I'm going to use the Twinkle Builder punch for a few stars. This is that scrap cardstock we stamped the stems on. I'm just going to place the paper down inside, and I'm going to punch. I'm not going to need them all. I'll save the moon for another card. And now we're going to start putting the pieces together for the card. I've got an extra piece of basic black cardstock, and I want to create a little bit of a chalkboard look on this paper to be reminiscent with this teacher card. So I've got my Whisper White ink pad here. And remember, stay with me to the end of the video. I've got another sample for you. The sponge dauber is a wonderful tool because your finger fits right up inside. I'm going to bring in my scratch paper again. This is the one I used on that background stamp. And I'm going to dab it here on the white craft ink pad. Now, white craft ink is pigmented, which means it dries very, very slow. You can use it on fabric or you can heat set with it using embossing powder. But I want to make sure I've got some coverage on here, but I don't want it too heavy. So I'm going to tap a little bit of that off. And then I'm going to come across here on the edges. I'm going to tip that dauber a little bit forward, and I'm going to create some smoky edges like a chalkboard. Although I didn't plan for my edges to show, I am going to go all the way around this piece of paper just in case. Back here to the silicone craft sheet, we're now going to adhere the notebook paper to the piece of black. Now I'm going to show you first on what my intention is. I don't want the black to show through those spiral ripped holes. So I'm making sure I'm moving it all the way over to the right side. Because I don't want to place adhesive here, I'm going to place adhesive carefully on the back side. Remember that this is very thin paper, so you're going to want to take your time because you don't want to rip it. And again, the silicone craft sheet is going to be wonderful for these corners because if you go off the edge, it's not going to end up on your work surface. I'm going to do my very best to make sure that everything is aligned. And then I'll tack that in place. Let's adhere this now to the base of the card. This is crumb cake cardstock. I did score it in half right before you joined me. If you're here watching from YouTube, you're going to find a link down in the video description below. That's going to lead you over to the pictures, cutting dimensions, and the supplies for today's card. I've used that bone folder for that nice crisp edge. I absolutely love that. And then here is that layer. We're going to add adhesive to the back, and that's going to get centered on the front of the card base. Now we're ready to add our apples. We've got our Granny Apple Green one and we've got our red one here. I'm going to flip those over. I've got my full-size dimensionals and I'm going to add those to the back side of my Granny Apple Green apple first. I'll take off the paper backings. This apple now is going to get tipped over here on the bottom left-hand side. Now this one, I want to call your attention to this. It's going to overlap a little bit, but I don't want dimensionals on the back side of the left. Otherwise, I'm going to have an elevation difference. With my silicone craft sheet, I'm going to place adhesive here. That's going to make sure my work surface stays clean again. And then I'm going to add a couple dimensionals to the other side. I'll go ahead and add that apple here. My next step is going to be to add the twine. Now this was burlap ribbon, and you can see there's some strands missing. That's the great thing about it. I can pull out one or two of these strands and I can use them individually. I absolutely love to do this because they're a little bit thicker than linen thread, and especially for my crumb cake cardstock bases or for my fall cards, even masculine cards, I like that more rugged look. So this is going to come up on the inside of the card, and this is going to get attached, made into a bow on the right. But I want to give you a tip. I don't know about you, but I often struggle with keeping tension on my twines and ribbons when I'm making my bow. I've got my glue dots here. This is my stylus tool, but it's going to work just fine. All I'm doing is trying to pick up that glue dot and I'm balling it up into a small ball. And then I'm going to place that right here on that notebook paper where I'm going to want that tie. Then I'm going to take my ends and I'm going to press them right inside that glue dot. That's going to help hold it secure in place, making it so much easier to make the bow. And then I'll come up underneath here and I'll finish making the bow loops. Once you're happy with your bow, I'm going to come in with my scissors and I'm just going to give those ends a little bit of a trim. And the last thing we're going to do now is we're going to add these stars. And I like to do this last because I'm going to be using the fine tip glue. I love this product because it has a needle point tip on it, which makes it really great for these small pieces. I've got my scrap paper here. I like to get it started to make sure that it's flowing well. Then I'm going to come in with my take your pick tool with my putty tip. And I'm going to place these on the card base first before I start adhering them, just to make sure that I'm happy with where they're going to go. So I'm going to lift it up with my tool, and I'm going to add a little bit of fine tip glue here, and then I'll adhere these. And I'm going to do that now with all three of these. Now I promised you one other sample using this exact same layout. Not only is it the same layout, but it's also the same stamp set. So I created a fall card for you as well. I used the designer series paper from Come to Gather. That's in the holiday catalog as well. Just changed up the colors to be reminiscent of the paper. And you can see how I flipped those stems here so that the wider tip would be at the top for my pumpkins. And here is where I chose to add my greetings. I just added a small strip. Otherwise, the cut and the angle on this card is identical. Which one of these cards is your favorite? Leave me a comment down below. And while you're there, please give this video a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.